So, look, all I want to do is this. I just want to find 11,780 votes, which is one more than we have, because we won the state. You will be at 11,779 within minutes, because Fulton County is totally corrupt, and so is she totally corrupt. So what are we going to do here, folks? I only need 11,000 votes. Fellas, I need 11,000 votes. Give me a break.
That call between Donald Trump and Georgia's Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger marked arguably the clearest effort yet by the twice-impeached ex-president to overturn the results of the 2020 election. Trump was caught pressuring a state elections chief to find the exact number of votes he needed to take the state. 3 recounts later, we know those votes just didn't exist. And now an investigation into Trump's actions is moving full steam ahead. Fulton County prosecutors have selected the people who will serve on a special grand jury for a criminal probe into efforts by Trump and his allies to reverse Georgia's election results. The Atlanta Journal-Constitution writes the jury will offer, quote, some much-needed firepower to prosecutors who have reached out to some 30 witnesses that have declined to testify voluntarily over the course of this 15-month probe. Joining me now, former federal prosecutor Glenn Kirshner, also with us, Democratic advisor Kurt Bardella. So, Glenn, how significant is it that there is a grand jury in this case? What does it mean for the investigation?
First of all, Zerlina, better late than never. It is hugely consequential because we've learned from DA Fani Willis that they've already put 50 witnesses before the grand jury before they impaneled this special grand jury. Now, those witnesses were the folks who were willing to cooperate without subpoenas. Let's call them the patriots, even though we don't know who they are. And then there are another 30 who have refused to cooperate. That's why DA Willis needed to get permission from the court to impanel a special grand jury, because only that special grand jury under the rules and procedures of Georgia have subpoena power. So Fani Willis said that after the May elections in Georgia, she will begin subpoenaing those reluctant witnesses. She said there are 30, but there are as many as 60 additional witnesses that she may be seeking to subpoena, which would put the tally at about 140 witnesses looking into Donald Trump's potential solicitation of election fraud. That's just one of the crimes, but that's the one you just played the audio recording of. That one is a laid down winner, in my estimation, for the government. But we've learned, based on some of the reporting about what DA Willis has said, they're also looking into the Lindsey Graham call to Brad Raffensperger. They're also looking into Rudy Giuliani's what may be false testimony to the Georgia State Judiciary Committee. So it feels like there is a pretty broad scope investigation that is about to move into a new phase in Georgia with this special grand jury.
I feel like this has just not been directly on our radar in the same way as other things, Kurt. I mean, in that call, Trump accuses election staffers of being unwilling to fight for him and promises there will be a backlash. He also disregards the evidence presented to him. Does the average voter, though, actually understand what he just did there? Like, does the average voter listen to that tape and understand that what Glenn just said, it could be a crime?
Well, they probably don't right now on the surface, but as this situation begins to get more momentum, as subpoenas start being issued, as there's more information that becomes part of the public process involved in this, then I think that the voter awareness will certainly raise up. I mean, that audio that you just played, that's as close to a smoking gun as I've ever heard in any investigation, because you have the then president soliciting an effort to try to get votes that don't exist, commit voter fraud. And there are a lot of people who are a part of this. I mean, the fact that so many people, 30 at least, have resisted cooperating voluntarily with this investigation. Listen, if you don't have anything to hide, you don't act that way. What are they afraid of? What are they trying to hide? And for any Republican out there who wants to try to say that this is a process that's dragged out, that's gone too long, that's politically motivated, they need to be reminded that the only reason why this thing's going so long is because so many people on their side of it are resisting to cooperate. And so these extraordinary means have to be taken to impanel a special grand jury to focus solely on this and compel testimony and cooperation. And I think that the more that we learn, just as we've seen this entire time, the more information that comes out about all of this, the worse and worse it gets.
And Glenn, it feels like I mentioned that the Georgia case has really been under the radar. Also, Trump just lost in New York. A New York judge denied his appeal of a contempt ruling related to the civil probe into his business practices. I mean, are these two areas that we're actually not paying enough attention to where Donald Trump could actually be held accountable? Because, you know, we saw sort of the grand jury investigation in New York with Alvin Bragg disappear. So are these the two areas, the civil probe and this Georgia case, where Donald Trump could be held accountable finally?
Yeah, absolutely. Of course, the civil probe that's being conducted in New York by Attorney General Letitia James is really only about two things. It's about money, and will Trump have to pay? Will he be penalized? And it's about the continued viability of the Trump organization, because Tish James may be able to succeed in shutting it down entirely by proving, in the context of a civil fraud case, that it was being run as a corrupt organization. And, you know, there is certainly some support for that proposition, because its chief financial officer, Alan Weisselberg, is criminally indicted and pending trial in the fall for running a 15-year criminal scheme to defraud in the first degree in New York. And the Trump organization is also indicted, which it makes it so infuriating that, you know, it seems like Trump is sort of the one who needs to be indicted the most. And there was recent reporting about how, in a deposition, he said he alone was responsible for the same kind of corrupt compensation that Matthew Calamari got, that Alan Weisselberg stands indicted for. So, yes, the civil probe in New York is still a real danger zone, at least with respect to the Trump organization and financial penalties. But, boy, I think the fact that the Georgia case is gearing up is actually a pretty good sign for justice.
One of the things, Kurt, that has been frustrating throughout the course of the Trump era is that lack of accountability and the idea that, like, he's a good, strong candidate, right? So the twice impeached president who lost the popular vote 2 times is somehow holding the Republican Party hostage, and they're like, no, we can't distance ourselves from this very strong candidate in 2024. I mean, put how they feel aside. Do voters get the message that perhaps this isn't someone we should reelect in 2024, given the fact that he has legal cases everywhere?
You know, I think that we actually are starting to see a little bit of that weakening of Trump's influence, and we're going to see that play out in some of these primaries that are coming up here in the month of May, where some of these Trump-backed candidates, Georgia being a really good example, the gubernatorial candidate he got behind is not doing well against the current governor, Brian Kemp. So there are some cracks in the armor of that Trump wall, I think. And I don't believe that the pursuit of justice here is going to do him any favors and help him in any way. And we already know from the tapes just from Kevin McCarthy that we've heard in the last couple of weeks that there's a component within them that they want to move on for Trump. They want to break for Trump. But these are people without any honor, without any moral compass. And when you deal with people like that, much like Donald Trump, loyalty is out the door. The minute that they think the water's too hot, they will break from him and act like they've never even heard or seen him before. And I think that these legal situations, as they grow and build, could be that last straw that creates that break and fissure within the Republican Party. I certainly would not want to be a candidate with my name on the ballot this year whose fate is tied completely to the fortunes of Donald Trump as he's battling all these legal battles. I don't think that is a good situation for Republicans. So for all the prognostication about how Republicans are a sure thing to win back the majorities in Congress and how this is going to be a terrible year for Democrats, I think that they are being very, very, very unmindful of the legal situation, how quickly the environment can change.
Glenn Kirshner and Kurt Bardella, I really appreciate you for being here today. Thank you so much. Please stay safe. Hi, I'm Zerlina Maxwell. Thanks for checking out our channel on YouTube. You can see more from Zerlina by clicking any of the videos on this screen, and make sure you subscribe below to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. Thanks for watching.